Velthak stared at the data pad in his four-fingered hands. The text glowed with standard Galactic Council formatting, but something about this assignment felt different. His supervisor Kremar had handed it to him, with what passed for a smile, among their species. "Easy work, Velthak," Kremar had said. "Just document another primitive species getting crushed. Should take a few cycles at most." The assignment was simple enough. A newly discovered species called humans had entered their first interstellar conflict. The aggressive Mordoon Empire had declared war on a human frontier colony. Standard procedure required a neutral observer to document the outcome for council records. Velthak had done this job dozens of times before. New species always made the same mistakes. They would fight bravely for a day or two, then surrender when they realized how outmatched they were. The reports practically wrote themselves. But as Velthak read the file on humans, he found himself puzzled. These creatures had only achieved spaceflight 20 years ago. They had established exactly 7 colonies beyond their home world. Their technology was rated as primitive by council standards, yet they had refused the Morden demand for immediate surrender. Foolish, Velthak muttered to himself. The Morden Empire controlled over 300 worlds. Their war fleets could reduce planets to ash. What could one small human colony possibly do against such power? The journey to human space took 3 days aboard a council observation vessel. Velthak spent the time reviewing standard first contact protocols and preparing his recording equipment. He expected to arrive just in time to document the human surrender ceremony. Instead, his ship dropped out of hyperspace to find something completely unexpected. The human colony world of New Terra looked nothing like a planet under siege. Ships moved in orderly patterns between orbital stations. Construction crews worked on what appeared to be new defensive platforms. Most surprising of all, several Morden vessels hung in space as twisted metal debris. "This cannot be correct," Velthak said to his pilot. "Check the coordinates again." "Coordinates confirmed, observer," the pilot replied. "We are at the location specified in your assignment." Before Velthak could respond, his communication system activated. A human face appeared on the screen. The creature had dark hair and calm brown eyes. When it spoke, the universal translator rendered its words in perfect galactic standard. "Council vessel, this is Colonel Lee Hunwoo of New Terra Defense Command. We have been expecting you, Observer Velthak. Permission to come aboard and escort you to the surface?" Velthak's mouth opened and closed several times before he found his voice. "You know who I am?" "Of course," Lee replied with what appeared to be amusement. "The council notified us of your assignment 3 days ago. We have prepared quarters and full documentation access for your stay." This was highly irregular. Most species barely acknowledged council observers, seeing them as unwanted reminders of their impending defeat. Yet this human was welcoming him, like an honored guest. 20 minutes later, Velthak found himself aboard a human transport ship. Colonel Lee sat across from him, apparently relaxed despite the fact that his world was supposedly at war. The human wore a simple uniform of dark green fabric. No ceremonial decorations or weapons were visible. "I must admit confusion, Colonel," Velthak said as they descended toward the planet's surface. "My briefing materials indicated that the Morden Empire had declared war on your colony. Yet you seem remarkably calm for someone facing imminent invasion." Lee smiled, and something about that expression made Velthak's scales prickle with unease. "Observer, the Morden did indeed declare war on us 6 days ago. They sent a battle fleet to enforce their demands. As you saw, that fleet no longer poses a threat to our colony. But how is this possible? The Morden are experienced warriors. Their technology is rated far above your own." "Technology is useful," Lee replied, "but it is only as good as the mind that employs it. Perhaps our methods will become clearer during your stay." The transport touched down at what appeared to be a standard colonial spaceport. Velthak expected to see signs of battle damage or frantic military preparations. Instead, he saw humans going about their daily business with apparent normalcy. Children played in nearby parks. Merchants sold goods from small stalls. Construction crews worked on new buildings. Where is your army? Velthak asked. You are looking at it, Lee replied. Before Velthak could ask what that meant, two more humans approached. Lee gestured toward them with obvious respect. Observer, may I present Captain Park So-jin, our Chief Tactical Analyst, and Major Kim Tae-ho, our Defense Coordinator. Park was a woman of medium height with sharp, intelligent eyes. She carried a data pad similar to Velthak's but covered with displays he did not recognize. Kim was taller, with the bearing of a career soldier, yet he smiled warmly as he greeted the alien observer. Welcome to New Terra, Observer Velthak, Park said. I hope your stay will be educational. Indeed, Kim added. We have much to show you. As they walked through the spaceport, Velthak noticed details that seemed wrong. What appeared to be cargo containers showed signs of heavy reinforcement. Loading equipment moved with precision that suggested military training. Even the civilian workers seemed unusually alert and organized. Colonel Lee, Velthak said carefully, I must ask directly. Are you prepared for the Mordun reinforcements that are certainly coming? Lee stopped walking and turned to face the observer. His expression remained calm, but Velthak caught something deeper in those brown eyes. Not fear, but something far more unsettling. Observer Velthak, you were sent here to document humanity's first interstellar war. I want you to document it, carefully. Record everything you see and hear. Your council may find our methods quite educational. What do you mean by that? The Mordun learned something important about us 6 days ago, Park said, consulting her data pad. They learned that we do not surrender easily. In approximately 4 hours, they will learn something else. What will they learn? Kim smiled, the same unsettling smile that Lee had shown earlier. They will learn that we have been preparing for this war far longer than anyone realizes. As if summoned by his words, a low alarm began sounding across the spaceport. It was not the panicked wail of an emergency alert, but a measured, steady tone. Around them, the humans began moving with sudden purpose, but still without any sign of panic. Ah, Lee said, checking a small device on his wrist. Right on schedule. The Mordun reinforcement fleet has just entered our system. Observer, you might want to find a good position to record what happens next. Velthak looked up at the sky, where distant flashes of light were beginning to appear among the stars. His assignment had been simple: document another primitive species getting crushed by superior forces. Instead, he was beginning to suspect that he was about to witness something entirely different. Something that would require a very different sort of report. The thought made his scales shiver with anticipation and growing dread. The Mordun reinforcement fleet emerged from hyperspace like angry metal sharks. Velthak counted at least 40 warships, including 3 massive dreadnoughts that could level entire cities. The alien observer felt his heart racing as he watched the display screens in the human command center. Colonel Lee Hyun-woo stood calmly at the center of organized chaos. Human officers moved with quiet efficiency around banks of glowing monitors. No one seemed afraid. If anything, they appeared focused and ready. Incoming transmission from the Mordun fleet, announced a communications officer. Put it through, Lee said. The main screen flickered to life, showing the scarred face of Warlord Grixtar. The Mordun commander's red eyes blazed with fury. His voice echoed through the command center like grinding stone. Humans, I am Warlord Grixtar of the Mordun 3rd Battle Fleet. You destroyed my advanced scouts. For this insult, your entire colony will burn. Surrender now, and I will grant you quick deaths. Lee stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. When he spoke, his voice carried no fear or anger. Warlord Grixtar, I am Colonel Lee Hyun-woo. Thank you for your generous offer, but we must respectfully decline. Velthak nearly dropped his recording device. The human had just refused surrender to a force that could crush his entire world. Grixtar's face twisted with rage. You dare mock me? I will personally watch your cities burn. That would be unfortunate, Lee replied. We had hoped for a more peaceful solution. The transmission cut off. Around the command center, human officers continued their work with the same calm efficiency. Velthak noticed that many of them were actually smiling. Colonel, Velthak said carefully, surely you understand the odds against you. That fleet could destroy your entire colony. Observer, Lee said, turning to face him. You assume that we are the ones facing destruction. I suggest you watch carefully. Captain Park So-jin approached with a datapad in her hands. Sir, all defensive positions report ready. The Morden are moving into attack formation exactly as predicted. Predicted? Velthak asked. We studied Morden tactical doctrine for months, Park explained. Their attack patterns are quite predictable. They always begin with the same sequence of maneuvers. Major Kim Tae-ho joined them at the main display. Observer, you might want to pay close attention to what happens next. Your council will want accurate records. On the screen, the Morden fleet had arranged itself in a classic invasion formation. The dreadnoughts formed the center, with smaller ships spreading out in protective wings. It was textbook military strategy, designed to overwhelm planetary defenses through sheer firepower. They are preparing to attack, Velthak observed. Actually, Lee said, they just walked into our trap. Before Velthak could ask what that meant, the human command center erupted into controlled activity. Officers called out coordinates and firing solutions. Park's fingers danced across her control pad with practiced skill. Defensive satellites. Coming online, someone announced. All weapon platforms report ready. Target locks confirmed on primary objectives. Velthak stared at the tactical display in growing confusion. The space around New Terra suddenly filled with energy signatures. Defensive platforms that had been invisible moments before now glowed like bright stars. Satellites revealed themselves as heavily armed weapons platforms. How is this possible? Velthak whispered. Stealth technology, Kim explained. We have been building defenses for months while pretending to be simple farmers. The first Morden ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Then another, and another. Within minutes, 6 of the largest enemy vessels had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris. Warlord Grickstar's voice crackled over the communications system. Impossible. How do you have such weapons? Lee activated the reply channel. Warlord, we learned about galactic standard weapons from your first contact protocols. We thought we would make some improvements. Velthak watched in shocked silence as the human defenses systematically dismantled the Mordoon attack formation. Ships that had seemed unstoppable moments before now fled in panic or exploded under precise weapons fire. This is not possible, he muttered. Your technology was rated as primitive. Engineer Nam Subin approached the group. She was a small woman with oil-stained work clothes and bright, intelligent eyes. Observer, would you like to see how we accomplish the impossible? Before Velthak could respond, she was leading him toward a transport pad. Within minutes, they were descending into underground tunnels that stretched beneath the colony. What? Velthak saw there made his legs weak with shock. Massive factories hummed with activity. Assembly lines produced weapons and equipment at an incredible pace. Automated systems crafted starship components with precision that rivaled the best galactic industries. Thousands of humans worked with quiet efficiency, building machines of war. We are very good at multitasking, Nam said with a smile that made Velthak shiver. The surface farms were real, but they were also camouflage. We have been preparing for war while growing food. How long have you been building all this? Since the day we first learned about the Morden Empire, Nam replied. We studied every species in the galaxy. We identified the most likely threats. Then we began preparing countermeasures. They walked past production lines creating weapons that Velthak did not recognize. Human workers moved with the same calm efficiency he had seen in the command center. No wasted motion, no panic, just steady, methodical progress. Your people knew this war was coming? Observer, we knew that someone would eventually try to conquer us. Humans do not like being conquered. So we decided to make conquest very expensive for anyone who tried. Above them, the battle continued. Through the factory's communication system, Velthak could hear reports of continued Morden losses. The alien fleet was retreating, but human forces were pursuing them. Will you let them escape? Velthak asked. Nam checked a wall display showing the space battle. Some will escape. They need to report back to their empire about what they learned here. What did they learn? The engineer's smile grew wider. They learned that humans do not surrender. They learned that we are much better prepared than anyone expected, and they learned that attacking us is a very bad idea. As they returned to the surface, Velthak tried to process what he had witnessed. The humans had not simply defended their colony. They had laid an elaborate trap and destroyed a superior force with calculated precision. Back in the command center, Colonel Lee was accepting reports from his officers. The Morden fleet was in full retreat. Human casualties were minimal. The colony was secure. "Observer," Lee said, noticing Velthak's return. "I hope this has been educational." Velthak stared at the tactical display, where the remnants of the Morden fleet were fleeing toward hyperspace. "Colonel, this was not a battle. This was a demonstration." "Very perceptive," Lee replied. "We wanted the galaxy to understand something important about humanity." "What is that?" Lee's calm expression never changed, but his eyes held depths that Velthak was only beginning to understand. "We wanted everyone to know that we are not easy prey. Anyone who thinks otherwise is welcome to test that assumption." The thought made Velthak's recording equipment feel suddenly very heavy in his hands. 3 days after the battle, Velthak sent his first report to the Galactic Council. He tried to explain what he had witnessed, but the words felt inadequate. How could he describe the systematic destruction of a superior force? How could he convey the unsettling calm of the human defenders? The Council's response arrived within hours. The message was brief and direct. Continue observation as planned. Document the Morden Empire's inevitable victory. Velthak stared at the message in disbelief. Did the Council not understand what had happened here? The Morden had lost 40% of their fleet. They were retreating across 3 star systems. Yet the Council still expected human defeat. "Troubling news, observer?" Colonel Lee Hyunwoo asked, approaching with 2 cups of what humans called coffee. "The Council believes the Morden will still win this war," Velthak admitted. Lee sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "Perhaps they know something we do not. Or perhaps they do not understand humans as well as they think they do." Before Velthak could respond, Captain Park So-jin arrived with urgent news. "Colonel, long-range sensors are detecting massive Morden fleet movements. It appears they are committing their entire Third Armada to our destruction." "How many ships?" Lee asked calmly. "Over 200 vessels, including their flagship dreadnought Bone Crusher. Admiral Techmore himself is leading the fleet." Velthak felt his heart racing. The Third Armada was one of the most feared military forces in the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of worlds. Their flagship alone could destroy small moons. "This changes everything," Velthak said. "You cannot possibly face such a force." Lee and Park exchanged a look that seemed to contain entire conversations. Then Lee smiled with the same unsettling calm Velthak had learned to dread. "Observer, I think. It is time you met Admiral Choi Min-ho." The human admiral arrived 6 hours later aboard what appeared to be a simple cargo vessel. Velthak watched through the spaceport's observation windows as the ship settled onto the landing pad. It looked like dozens of other commercial transports he had seen throughout the galaxy. Then the ship began to change. Cargo panels slid away to reveal weapon turrets. The hull expanded as hidden sections deployed. Within minutes, the simple transport had become a massive battle cruiser, bristling with advanced weapons. "Modular design," explained Chief Engineer Yoon Da-eun, who had joined them at the observation window. "We believe in efficiency." Admiral Choi Min-ho was a tall man with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. When he greeted Velthak, the alien observer felt like he was being measured and catalogued. "So you are our council observer," Choi said. "Good. What you witness here will be important for galactic stability." "Admiral," Velthak said carefully, "the Morden Third Armada is the most powerful military force in this sector. How do you plan to face 200 warships?" "Observer," Choi replied. "Who said we only have 1 ship?" As if summoned by his words, space around New Terra began to fill with vessels. Ships that had looked like asteroid miners revealed themselves as heavy cruisers. Commercial transports unfolded into battle formations. Even small pleasure craft deployed weapons that should not have been possible. "How many ships do you have?" Velthak whispered. Enough, Admiral Choi said simply. The Morden Third Armada arrived the next day with the fury of an angry god. Their ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, a wall of metal and death that stretched across the star system. At their center, the dreadnought Bone Crusher loomed like a mobile space station. Admiral Thekmore's message was broadcast across all frequencies. Humans, you destroyed my scouts. You humiliated my advance fleet. For these insults, I will personally oversee the extinction of your species. Surrender now, and I will make your deaths quick. The human response came not from New Terra, but from Admiral Choi aboard his flagship. Admiral Thekmore, I am Admiral Choi Minho of the Human Defense Fleet. We appreciate your generous offer, but we must decline. Then you will die with honor at least, Thekmore replied. I respect courage, even in the face of hopeless odds. What happened next redefined everything Velthak thought he knew about space warfare. The humans did not wait for the Morden to attack. Instead, they struck first with coordinated precision that took Velthak's breath away. Ships that had been hidden behind moons and asteroids revealed themselves in perfect ambush positions. The human fleet moved like a single organism, each vessel playing its part in a larger strategy. But it was not just the tactics that shocked Velthak. It was the way the humans adapted in real time to changing conditions. When the Morden tried to use their superior numbers to surround the human fleet, Commander Lim Jae-sung turned the maneuver against them. He allowed his ships to appear trapped, then triggered a hidden minefield that had been placed days earlier. The Morden forces found themselves caught between human weapons and their own exploding ships. How did you know they would use that formation? Velthak asked. We studied their previous battles, Park explained from her position at the tactical display. Admiral Thekmore has used the same encirclement strategy 47 times. It worked 46 times. And the 47th time? He tried it against humans. The battle continued for hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The human fleet fought with methodical precision, systematically dismantling Morden formations. When enemy ships tried to retreat, they found their escape routes blocked by human vessels that had somehow anticipated their movements. What disturbed Velthak most was not the human military capability, but their attitude. There was no bloodlust, no savage joy in victory. Captain Song Hee-jin coordinated rescue operations for Morden survivors while simultaneously planning the next assault. Why do you save enemy wounded? Velthak asked her. Because they are wounded, Song replied as if the question made no sense. War is about achieving objectives, not causing unnecessary suffering. By the end of the day, the mighty Third Armada was scattered wreckage floating in space. The dreadnought Bone Crusher drifted, powerless, its engines destroyed and its weapons silenced. Admiral Thekmore himself was rescued by human forces after his command bridge was evacuated. In the aftermath, Velthak found himself alone with Colonel Lee in the quiet command center. Most of the staff had gone to coordinate relief efforts and prisoner processing. Colonel, Velthak said, struggling to find words, what I witnessed today should not have been possible. What do you mean? Your people face the most feared fleet in this sector, and you defeat them as if it were a training exercise. You fight with the same calm you might use to solve a puzzle. How is this possible? Lee considered the question carefully before answering. Observer, war is simply problem-solving under extreme conditions. Humans are very good at solving problems. But the Morden had superior numbers, superior weapons, superior experience. They had advantages, Lee agreed. But they also had weaknesses. We studied their strengths and prepared countermeasures. We analyzed their weaknesses and developed exploits. When the time came, we applied our solutions. Velthak looked out at the debris field that had once been the Third Armada. This was not a battle. This was a demonstration. Yes, Lee said quietly. We wanted the galaxy to understand something important. What? Lee's calm eyes met Velthak's gaze. We wanted everyone to know that threatening humanity is a very expensive mistake. The observer felt his scales prickle with a fear he was only beginning to understand. The humans had not simply won a victory. They had sent a message that would echo across the galaxy. He was beginning to suspect that message was intended for more than just the Morden Empire. The war was spreading. What had begun as a simple territorial dispute now involved 6 star systems and dozens of worlds. Velthak watched the tactical displays in growing amazement as human forces advanced across Morden space with mechanical precision. "How is this possible?" he asked Agent Bae Young-suk, who had arrived 3 days earlier. The human intelligence officer was a quiet woman with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. "Observer," Bae said, consulting her datapad. "What did you think we were doing for the 20 years since first contact? Developing your colonies, learning galactic technology, trading with other species." "We were doing all of those things," Bae agreed. "But we were also preparing for this exact situation." She led Velthak to a secure briefing room where wall displays showed detailed information about dozens of alien species, military capabilities, political structures, economic systems, psychological profiles. The scope of data was staggering. "You have been spying on the entire galaxy," Velthak realized. "We have been learning," Bae corrected. "The galaxy is full of species that have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We needed to understand what we were dealing with." The displays shifted to show more Dune fleet movements from the past decade. Battle formations, tactical preferences, supply line patterns. Every detail had been cataloged and analyzed. "We knew this war would come eventually," Bae continued. "The Morden Empire expands constantly. We were in their path, so we prepared." "For 20 years? Since the day we learned that hostile aliens existed, yes." Velthak studied the intelligence files with growing horror. The humans had not simply prepared for war. They had built an entire civilization designed for conflict. Every colony, every trade route, every diplomatic contact had been part of a vast military strategy. "Your people knew they would have to fight?" "Our people knew that someone would eventually try to conquer us," Bae said. "Humans have experience with conquest. We do not like it." Director Ko Yoonji arrived to escort them to the orbital shipyards. The massive industrial complexes had appeared seemingly overnight, but Velthak now understood that they had been planned for years. "Each factory ship can produce a full squadron of fighters in 18 hours, Ko explained as they toured the facilities. "Our cruiser production lines can build a battleship in 6 days. We currently have 47 factory ships operating across 7 systems. You are building fleets faster than the Morden can destroy them," Velthak observed. "That was the intention," Ko confirmed. "War is ultimately about resources. We made sure we would have more resources than our enemies." The statistics were overwhelming. Human industrial output had increased by 12,000% since the war began. Supply lines stretched across space like invisible highways, managed by logistics chief Shin Dong-wook and his team of coordinators. "Every human settlement is part of the supply network," Shin explained, showing Velthak massive cargo ships being loaded with everything from food to ammunition. "We do not have front lines and rear areas. Every world supports every other world." But the most disturbing revelation came when Velthak met Dr. Jang So-young, the human psychological warfare specialist. "Observer," Dr. Jang said, "may I ask what you know about Morden psychology?" "They are aggressive warriors who value strength above all else." "Exactly. And what happens to warriors when they begin to doubt their strength?" Dr. Jang showed him recordings of recent Morden communications. The tone had changed dramatically since the war began. Where once there had been confident boasts and threats, now there was confusion and growing fear. "We have studied every species in the galaxy," Dr. Jang explained. "We know their psychological weaknesses as well as their military capabilities. The Morden cannot understand how they are losing to a supposedly primitive species. This creates doubt. Doubt becomes fear. Fear becomes paralysis. You are fighting a war against their minds as well as their ships. The most efficient war is one your enemy surrenders before fighting. We prefer efficient solutions." Velthak was beginning to understand that he was witnessing something unprecedented. The humans were not simply fighting a war. They were demonstrating a completely new approach to interstellar conflict. General Park Jin-woo confirmed this during their meeting at the Strategic Command Center. The human general stood before displays showing battles across dozens of worlds, coordinating military operations with the precision of a master chess player. Observer, your council assumes that primitive species fight primitive wars, Park said. They expect desperate charges and heroic sacrifices. They do not expect systematic analysis and methodical execution. You studied us as well, Velthak. Realized. Of course, we studied everyone. The council, the major powers, the trading cartels, the military alliances. We needed to understand the environment we were entering. Park gestured to the battle displays. Every engagement you see here was planned months in advance. We identified Mordun's strategic objectives, analyzed their probable responses, and prepared countermeasures. When the war began, we simply implemented our plans. You make it sound like a business operation. War is business, Park said simply. Very expensive business. We decided to make it more expensive for our enemies than for ourselves. The scope of human preparation was staggering. They had not simply built weapons and trained soldiers. They had created an entire military-industrial civilization that could adapt and respond to threats faster than their enemies could develop them. Commander Ryu Hee-jin demonstrated this adaptability when a new Mordun fleet tried an unexpected attack strategy. Within hours, human forces had analyzed the new tactics, developed countermeasures, and implemented them across all battlefronts. How do you coordinate so quickly? Velthak asked. Practice, Ryu replied. We have been running war games for 15 years. Every possible scenario has been tested and refined. Even scenarios involving species you had never met? Especially those. We created theoretical opponents based on every possible combination of technology and psychology. When we finally met real enemies, they fell within parameters we had already explored. As the days passed, Velthak watched the Mordun Empire crumble under systematic human pressure. It was not a glorious conquest or a desperate struggle. It was methodical dismantlement of an entire civilization's ability to wage war. Human forces did not simply defeat Mordun fleets. They captured supply depots, disrupted communication networks, and convinced entire systems to surrender without fighting. They fought with industrial efficiency while maintaining strict rules about civilian casualties and prisoner treatment. Why do you show mercy to defeated enemies? Velthak asked Colonel Lee during one of their regular briefings. Because mercy is a weapon too, Lee replied. Every Mordun soldier we treat well becomes proof that surrender is preferable to continued resistance. Every civilian population we protect becomes an example to other worlds. You use kindness as a military tactic? We use everything as a military tactic. Fear, hope, pride, shame, greed, altruism. Humans understand that war is fought in the mind as much as in space. Velthak looked out at the stars, where human ships patrolled space, that had belonged to the Mordun Empire for centuries. The transition had been so smooth that many worlds barely noticed they had new protectors. Colonel, he said quietly, this entire war has been a demonstration, has it not? Lee nodded slowly. We needed the galaxy to understand what it means, to threaten humanity. We needed everyone to see what we are capable of when forced to defend ourselves. And now they have seen. Yes, now they have seen. The thought sent chills through Velthak's scaled hide. The humans had not simply won a war. They had announced their presence to the galaxy in terms that every species would understand. The galaxy would never be the same. The message arrived on a heavily encrypted Mordun military channel. Even through the static and interference, Admiral Velkoth's desperation was clear. The remnants of the Mordun High Command had made a decision that would haunt Velthak for the rest of his days. All remaining fleet commanders, the transmission began. We are implementing Final Protocol Omega. Planet killer weapons are authorized for immediate deployment against all human civilian targets. Velthak felt his blood freeze. Planet killers were weapons of absolute destruction, banned by every civilized species in the galaxy. They did not destroy cities or armies. They destroyed entire worlds. Colonel Lee Hyun-woo stood silently as the message played. Around the human command center, officers continued their work with the same calm efficiency Velthak had observed for weeks. No one seemed surprised by this development. "Colonel," Velthak said urgently, "you must evacuate your civilian worlds immediately. Planet killers cannot be stopped once they are deployed." "Observer," Lee replied quietly, "the Mordun have just made their final mistake." Before Velthak could ask what that meant, Captain Park Sojin approached with grim news. "Sir, we have confirmed launches from 3 Mordun Fortress worlds. Planet killers are targeting New Seoul, New Busan, and the Jeju colony. 3 human worlds, nearly 50 million civilians." Velthak had visited New Seoul during his assignment. He had seen human children playing in parks, families sharing meals, artists creating beautiful works. All of it would be erased in minutes when the planet killers arrived. "There must be something you can do," Velthak pleaded. Lee's expression had not changed, but something in his eyes made Velthak step backward. It was not anger or fear. It was something far colder and more terrible. "There is," Lee said simply. "Admiral." Moon Seung-ho appeared on the communication screen. His flagship had been patrolling near Morden space, but now it was moving with desperate speed toward the threatened human worlds. "Colonel," Admiral Moon reported, "we are tracking the planet killers. Estimated impact in 6 hours. We cannot intercept them in time." "Admiral," Lee said calmly, "you are authorized to implement Response Protocol 7. Velthak saw Admiral Moon hesitate for just a moment. "Sir, are you certain? Protocol 7 cannot be undone. The Morden chose to target our innocent civilians. They have made this necessary." "Understood, sir. Protocol 7 is now active." The transmission ended. Around the command center, human officers began working with sudden intensity. New displays, activated showing star maps Velthak had never seen before. Weapon systems came online that had been hidden throughout the war. "What is Protocol 7? Velthak asked. "Something we hoped we would never need to use," Colonel Lee replied. Major Kim Tae-ho approached with technical readouts that made no sense to Velthak. "Sir, all deep strike weapons are armed and ready. Targeting solutions are locked on 47 priority objectives." 47? Velthak repeated. "Every major Morden military installation, command center, and industrial facility," Kim explained. "We have been preparing these strikes since the war began. But those targets are scattered across hundreds of light years. How can you possibly hit them all simultaneously?" Park showed him the tactical display. Human ships were moving throughout Morden space, taking positions that had seemed random during the previous weeks of fighting. Now, Velthak could see they formed a perfect pattern, surrounding every critical Morden facility. "We have been positioning our forces for this possibility since the war began," Park explained. "Every battle, every advance, every retreat has been designed to place our ships where they would be needed, for Protocol 7. On the display, Velthak watched the planet killers racing toward their human targets. In 3 hours, 3 worlds would die. 50 million people would be erased from existence. Then the human response began. It started with flashes of light throughout Mordun space. Brief, brilliant explosions that appeared for seconds before fading. Each flash marked the destruction of something the Mordun Empire had spent centuries building. Orbital shipyards at Morketh destroyed, someone reported. Command center at Grixthol eliminated. Industrial complex at Velmara neutralized. The reports continued for hours. Every critical facility in the Morden Empire was systematically eliminated by weapons that appeared from nowhere, struck with impossible precision, and vanished before defensive systems could respond. "How are you doing this?" Velthak whispered. "Engineer." Nam Subin had joined them at the command center. Her usual cheerful demeanor was replaced by grim professionalism. "We developed weapons specifically for this scenario. Devices that can eliminate large installations without causing unnecessary casualties. Weapons that can strike across interstellar distances? When properly positioned, yes. We hoped we would never need to use them." Commander Kang Yu-jin coordinated the strikes from her position at the tactical board. Each target was eliminated, with mathematical precision. No wasted effort, no excessive destruction. Just the systematic removal of the Morden Empire's ability to wage war. Military academy at Thekdan destroyed. Fleet headquarters at Morgul eliminated. Central command at Velkaran neutralized. Within 6 hours, the Mordun Empire ceased to exist as a military power. Their fleet still fought in scattered battles across the galaxy, but their command structure, supply lines, and industrial base had been completely eliminated. The planet killers never reached their targets. Admiral, Moon's ships intercepted them just hours away from the human worlds. The weapons that could destroy planets were themselves destroyed by human technology that should not have existed. How? Velthak asked. We have been developing countermeasures for every possible threat, Admiral Moon explained via communication. Planet killers are old technology. We have been ready for them for years. The aftermath was swift and absolute. Without central command or supply lines, Mordun forces across the galaxy began surrendering. Some tried to continue fighting, but their weapons ran out of ammunition. Their ships ran out of fuel. Their soldiers ran out of hope. Strategic Commander Ryu Hee-jin began coordinating the occupation of former Mordun territory. She worked with the same calm efficiency that characterized all human military operations. What will you do with the Mordun worlds? Velthak asked. Rehabilitate them, Ryu replied. The Mordun people are not our enemies. Their leaders made poor decisions, but the population deserves a chance at peaceful existence. You would show mercy to those who tried to destroy your worlds. Observer, revenge is wasteful. We prefer permanent solutions. Ambassador Oh Tae-min arrived to begin negotiating surrender terms with surviving Mordun leaders. The terms were fair, but absolute. The Mordun would be allowed to keep their worlds and their culture, but they would never again possess the capability to threaten other species. We are not conquerors, Ambassador Oh explained to Velthak. We are problem solvers. The Mordun Empire was a problem. We have solved it. By destroying their entire military capability, by removing their ability to harm others while preserving their ability to live peaceful lives. This is what we call a win-win solution. As Velthak watched the final Mordun fleet surrender, he realized he had witnessed something that would reshape the galaxy. The humans had not simply won a war. They had demonstrated that they could wage total war while maintaining their moral principles. Somehow that made them even more terrifying than if they had been simple conquerors. Colonel Lee, Velthak said during their final briefing, what you have accomplished here will change everything. That was the intention, Lee replied. We needed the galaxy to understand that threatening human civilians is unacceptable. And now they understand. Yes, now they understand. Velthak looked out at the stars, where human ships patrolled space that had been contested just days before. The transition was so smooth that most worlds barely noticed their new protectors, but Velthak noticed, and he understood that the galaxy had just acquired a new kind of guardian, one that preferred peace but was absolutely capable of enforcing it. The thought both comforted and terrified him. Velthak sat in his quarters aboard the Council transport ship, staring at the blank datapad that would contain his final report. 3 months had passed since the end of what historians were already calling the Mordun War. 3 months of trying to find words for what he had witnessed. How could he explain to the Galactic Council that everything they thought they knew about warfare was wrong? How could he describe a species that waged total war with the same calm efficiency most civilizations used to manage trade negotiations? The preliminary reports had already caused panic among Council members. Species that had dominated the galaxy for millennia suddenly realized they were sharing space with something they did not understand. Something that combined technological brilliance with strategic thinking in ways that made conventional military doctrine obsolete. Observer Velthak, the ship's communication officer, announced, "You have an incoming transmission from the Council chambers." The main screen activated, showing the familiar blue-scaled features of Council leader Zardan. Behind him, Velthak could see other Council members gathered in emergency session. "Observer," Zardan said without preamble, "we have received your preliminary reports. We need clarification on several points." "Of course, Council leader. Is it true that humanity defeated the entire Mordun Empire in less than 4 months?" "Yes, Council leader." Is it true that they accomplished this while suffering minimal casualties? Human military losses were less than 2% of engaged forces, Council Leader. And is it true that they have now occupied former Mordun territory without resistance? Veltuk hesitated. Occupied was not the right word for what the humans had done. Council Leader, the humans have assumed administrative responsibility for former Mordun worlds. However, they are treating the population as refugees rather than conquered enemies. Explain. The humans are providing medical aid, food distribution, and infrastructure repair to all former Mordun worlds. They have established refugee camps for displaced populations and are offering relocation assistance to any Mordun who wish to emigrate to neutral space. The council chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Through the communication link, Velthak could hear fragments of heated discussion. Council Leader, Velthak continued, humanity appears to view the Mordun people as victims of their own government, rather than enemies to be punished. This makes no sense, Zardan replied. They possess overwhelming military superiority. Why do they not simply enslave the conquered population? Because, Council Leader, that is not how humans think about victory. Velthak spent the next hour answering questions that revealed how little the Council understood about human psychology. They could not comprehend a species that waged war to achieve peace, rather than to acquire territory or resources. Observer, Zardan finally said, we need your assessment of the threat humanity poses to galactic stability. This was the question Velthak had been dreading. He had spent months thinking about how to answer it. Council Leader, humanity is not a threat to galactic stability. They are galactic stability. The council chamber fell silent. Explain that statement immediately, Zardan ordered. Council Leader, I have observed human military doctrine for 3 months. They do not fight for conquest or resources. They fight to eliminate threats to peaceful civilization. Any species that threatens galactic peace will face the same systematic response that destroyed the Mordun Empire. You are saying they have appointed themselves as galactic peacekeepers? No, Council Leader. I am saying they have made themselves into the galaxy's immune system. They respond to threats automatically, and with overwhelming force, but only to threats. Through the communication link, Velthak could hear urgent discussions among council members. Terms like military intervention and preemptive action were mentioned repeatedly. Council Leader, Velthak said urgently, I must advise against any aggressive action toward humanity. Why? Because they have been preparing for that possibility since the day they achieved spaceflight. Every human colony, every trade route, every diplomatic contact has been part of a defensive strategy designed to protect their civilization from any conceivable threat. Velthak activated his datapad and transmitted detailed files to the council chambers. These are the specifications for human defensive capabilities that they allowed me to observe. I estimate this represents less than 10% of their total military capacity. The council chamber erupted in chaos as members reviewed the technical data. Weapons that could eliminate targets across interstellar distances, ships that could transform from commercial vessels to battlecruisers in minutes, industrial capacity that could replace entire fleets faster than they could be destroyed. How is this possible? Zardan whispered. Because humans understand that. The best defense is preparation, Velthak replied. They have spent 20 years preparing for every possible threat the galaxy could present. What do you recommend, Observer? Complete diplomatic accommodation, Council Leader. Offer humanity full recognition as a Tier 1 civilization. Establish comprehensive trade agreements. Create cultural exchange programs. Do everything possible to ensure they remain satisfied with their current territory. You recommend appeasement? Recommend survival, Council Leader. The transmission ended abruptly. Velthak knew the Council would spend days debating his recommendations. He also knew they would ultimately accept them, because the alternative was unthinkable. 2 weeks later, the Galactic Council announced sweeping diplomatic initiatives with humanity. Trade agreements were signed. Non-aggression pacts were established. Cultural exchange programs were implemented. The official statement spoke of welcoming our newest galactic partners and building bridges of understanding. Velthak knew the truth. The galaxy's major powers were frightened. They were offering everything they could to keep humanity peaceful and content. The strategy appeared to be working. Human forces completed their withdrawal from former Morden territory, leaving behind civilian administrators and aid workers. The transition governments they established were fair and effective. Former Morden worlds were already reporting improved living conditions and economic growth. Velthak received one final assignment before returning to his homeworld. He was to attend the formal signing of the Humanity Accords, which would establish humanity's official place in galactic civilization. The ceremony took place on the neutral world of Kepler Station. Representatives from every major species gathered to welcome humanity into the galactic community. The speeches spoke of cooperation and mutual benefit. But Velthak noticed that human security was provided entirely by human forces. No other species. Ships were allowed within 3 light hours of the station during the ceremony. Colonel Lee Hyun-woo served as humanity's chief military representative. When he greeted Velthak before the ceremony, his manner was as calm and courteous as ever. Observer, I hope your stay with us was educational. It was terrifying, Colonel. Lee smiled the same unsettling smile Velthak remembered from their first meeting. Knowledge often is, Observer. But knowledge is also necessary for wisdom. What will humanity do now? Will you continue expanding? We have all the territory we need, Observer. We prefer to be good neighbors. And if other species threaten galactic peace, then we will solve those problems as they arise. During the ceremony, Velthak watched as species after species offered friendship and cooperation to humanity. Trade deals worth trillions of credits were announced. Scientific exchange programs were established. Cultural exhibitions were planned. It was the most comprehensive diplomatic outreach in galactic history, and Velthak knew it was all motivated by fear. After the ceremony, he sat alone, in his quarters, finally completing his report to the Council. His final entry would become legendary among diplomatic observers. Assignment complete. Humanity has been successfully integrated into galactic civilization. They pose no threat to species that respect galactic peace. They pose an absolute threat to any species that violates it. Recommendation: never assign anyone else to witness humanity's war. Some knowledge is too dangerous for wide distribution. Personal note: I was sent to document humanity's first interstellar conflict. What I documented was not a war at all, but a demonstration. They showed us what they could do, not what they wanted to do. I pray to whatever gods listen that we never give them reason to show us more. Velthak sealed the report and transmitted it to the Council archives. Then he sat back in his chair, watching the stars through his viewport. Somewhere out there, human ships patrolled space routes that had been contested for centuries. Former enemy worlds prospered under human protection. Trade flowed freely through regions that had known only war. The galaxy was more peaceful than it had been in 1,000 years, and everyone knew exactly why. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had simply made it very clear what would happen to anyone who threatened galactic peace. It was, Velthak reflected, perhaps the most effective military strategy ever devised. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it made him shiver every time he looked at the stars.